I'm Matt.
I'm Kerry.
We are the Stagmer brothers of Baltimore Knife and Sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite weapons, and some weapons that you've never seen before.
This is Man-at-Arms, REFORGED.
Looking back at the comments section of so many episodes, we see requests for Kingdom Hearts Keyblade. Nothing really has jumped out at us until we saw that Jack Sparrow was in the new Kingdom Hearts trailer. And then, knowing that there was a Pirates of the Caribbean version, that's something we decided we had to jump on. The real problem for us is it's almost completely made out of wood. Doing all of this woodwork in a metal shop is actually more challenging than you would think. I've never made a ship's wheel, kind of excited to do that. We'll get at it and show you how this thing works.
For our Keyblade build, since most of the components are made from wood, we went ahead and acquired a substantial piece of 8-quarter white oak that I'm going to cut down and shape for the two major components, the steering wheel and the trough that it goes through. I'll cut this with a circle saw, and then we'll machine it on the mill to drill our large holes, and then Matt will hand sculpt and shape everything on the sander.
We now have 3 equal parts cut from our board. 2 will be glued together to become the fender-like object that the wheel will go inside, and 1 will become the wheel itself.
So I'm beginning to carve the skulls for the beads of the Keyblade. We're using cue balls. I'm slicing these in half. I can get 2 skulls out of 1. The measurements are pretty tight, but I can keep them pretty consistent. I've begun to do the carving on this one, and we'll match that up to some of the finished ones. Now, since I'm getting 2 skulls out of each cue ball, I'm going to have an extra half of a cue ball left. So what we're going to do is I'm going to carve an extra skull to give away to a lucky fan at some point.
In this shop, we don't really do a lot of woodwork, and when we do, we try and be careful. We're often using metalworking tools for that. I'm going to be cutting the ship's wheel for the Kingdom Hearts build. I'm using a large hole saw. I actually don't like it. It doesn't sit rigid in the milling machine. It doesn't give me the clean kind of cut that I prefer to have. Probably would have been better off with a fly cutter on something like this. So we'll do it differently next time. But for this time, we'll go through and make the cut, and then we'll true all the wood up.
Even with all the fancy tools in the shop, sometimes doing things by hand is the correct way. I moved to the sander to sand our steering wheel nice and round.
In the center of the compass of the Keyblade, there's a profile of a skull carved in. Instead of carving that into the wood, we're going to use the same material, the cue balls that we did the bead skulls with, and we're going to carve that, color it, and applique that.
I'm going to be cutting the spindles that go on the ship's wheel for the Keyblade. I'm going to repeat that cut. I'm going to be able to do quite a few of them by doing them on the CNC mill. I've got a 4th axis that gives me my rotation, so it not only will cut the different form as you've seen us use the machine, but it'll rotate the object and create it more in a lathe-like pattern. It's kind of overcomplicating the way that they should be done. I probably should have just cut them on the lathe. does repeat it. If I was making hundreds of it, it would have been worth all the programming time. But now that everything is set up, I can just put another piece of wood in, hit the button, walk away and do something else while it's running.
After tracing his pattern onto our white oak board, Rick moves to the bandsaw to begin cutting out our fender.
I'm going to be using the Gorton mill to drill the holes in the outside of this ring. That's where the spindles are going to set, so they'll set right in here in this section. I'm going to drill a pilot, and then I'm going to come back with a milling cutter. It's a metal cutting cutter, but it's very sharp, so it should do the job, get us right to the size we need, and then the spindles will push in. I'm going to go all the way around, drill all 8, and then I'll have to do that centerpiece. That centerpiece is only about 2 inches around, and it'll only take a 1/2 inch hole, so I'll be able to index that, go it around, and then the whole thing should spin.
All right, it's time to do a whole lot of wood sanding. We've got our fender pieces cut out, and we made a groove so that the wheel could fit in there. Go in just a little bit and turn. So now that we have that done, I'm gonna take it to a sander and just round everything over, give it a lot more organic shape, make it look like it was molded wood instead of one solid piece. I've cut the first piece of our guard. So I hold it here. We're gonna make this out of 2 mirrored pieces, classic Keyblade form, but it's just a big chunk of wood right now. From here, I have to do a lot of sculpting into it. This is really something that I highly enjoy. It's very challenging. There's some portions of this where I have to change the levels, and there's some that I just have to round over, and then we're gonna glue them all together and get our guard.
For the main mast for this Keyblade, we're going to be using a piece of wood left over from a timberjack that I actually had around the shop. It's not particularly straight, but it is a good piece of hickory. So we're going to put it up on the lathe. I'm going to true that taper, and then I'll cut it down to size so that I know what my beginning and ending of my tapers are. I've got a couple of calipers set up, 2 inch, 1 inch. It's pretty straightforward. Create that taper nice and clean. Make sure it fits into the other sections the way it needs to be, and then we'll sand it all up and get the rigging on it. Since this piece of wood is fairly warped, I'm going to be turning it on centers. I've actually got a live center set on the far end that's going to spin with the wood and give me some pressure to keep it from whipping. As I go down and cut the surface, it'll true up, and we'll have a straight and true mast when we're done. Since we decided to make this entire guard form with 2 large sections of wood, Matt's going to have to go in and differentiate the different levels to make it look like it's made of several different pieces. Now that the basic form of this guard is finished, Ferenc is going to be going in and carving in the detail.
All right, guys, now that we have most of our handle pieces made and detailed, let's go ahead and take a rough look of how this all assembles. So I've taken our 2 main handle halves, and I've put 2 grooves on either side using about a 1 inch wheel to create the relief where our dowels go. So these sit here like that. Then these will get pinned in, and then we have our little compass plate that sits over here that will kind of hide the seam. This is basically our pommel. Just use a narrow wheel to create some shape, do a little line work on the outside. This has a 1 inch hole as well.
This slides on here. And then this will clamp to that. This will get pinned in. We'll fill it in. Since this whole thing is supposed to be like the black pearl, all of our coloring is going to be done with black paint and stain. This little guy I also made on a narrow wheel, about a 1/2 inch wheel. Just sand it to shape. This fits on here, and then our whole wheel assembly fits on top of there.
Ilya's now going to forge the bracket that I need to be able to assemble this. The wheel has to sit in an exact location where the fender that goes around the outside will strike against the center and the piece won't spin. Once we get everything located, we'll have to drill or punch a hole through the steel, and that'll allow us to set in an axle and spin the wheel. We're going to be laying in some gold trim on this wheel. Ferenc is going to be able to go in and paint that, but he's going to mask it off and cut it nice and clean. After he finishes this, we'll only have a few small things left to attach, and this weapon will be ready to go. Although this was a departure for us to work in this material, we feel that we've done justice for this build to both the Black Pearl and the Keyblade.
Click here to subscribe, or click here to watch more episodes. Thanks for watching Man-at-Arms Reforged. We need to know what you want the guys to build, so tell us in the comments below what weapons you want to see next.